Why did his words stop her breath in its tracks? The morning at Fort Stewart had been like any other, gray mist hugging the fences, cicadas buzzing in the trees, the hum of fluorescent lights inside the guard shack. Staff Sergeant Riley, at least, that was the name on the roster, stood watch in faded fatigues that had lost their sharpness long ago. No medals gleamed on her chest, no unit patch to mark distinction. To anyone passing, she was invisible, just another soldier assigned to routine detail. And yet, when the convoy of black SUVs rolled up to the checkpoint, something in the air shifted. The crunch of gravel under synchronized tires, the sharp symmetry of headlights cutting through haze, it wasn't just a visit. It was intent, purpose cloaked in silence. The first SUV stopped and the driver's door opened. A man stepped out, his movements controlled, efficient. He carried no excess energy, no wasted motion. It was the kind of presence that quieted a yard without a single raised voice. Commander Grant, Navy SEAL. His reputation preceded him, though none of it was spoken here. He handed her documents. She scanned them, steady, precise. Authorization AR-529C QR code matched. Signature, she pressed the gate release. A simple exchange, a soldier following protocol. But then he paused. His eyes found hers, sharp, unflinching, and his first words shattered the silence. "Good, I'm glad you're the one guarding this place." Her body gave nothing away. Just a nod, a flick of the wrist as if confirming the motion of a switch. But inside, her pulse tripped. The line carried no weight on paper, but in her chest it landed heavy, unexpected. Why her? Why here? Why now? The SEAL team moved out, boots striking gravel in professional cadence, their weapons slung but ready, eyes scanning perimeters with silent efficiency. They spread out like shadows, every motion rehearsed but alive. And she stayed at her console, back straight, eyes on the log. Yet the words lingered like an echo. "Good, I'm glad you're the one guarding this place." As if he knew something. As if he had been waiting for her specifically. The illusion of routine broke fully minutes later, when Major Brent stormed across the yard. His boots shone too brightly for field work, his uniform crisp as if pressed that morning by anger alone. His voice cracked the silence like a whip. Why wasn't base ops? His face pinched, his jaw stiff with indignation. Special operations don't just wander into my depot. Riley didn't flinch. "Sir, authorization cleared." "You're a guard," he snapped. "You don't make operational calls, you call me." The SEAL commander stepped in, voice calm but edged with steel. Her check was flawless, authorization valid, procedures followed. He held up a tablet, glowing with digital orders, every detail irrefutable. His nostrils flared, his pride wounded. He leaned close, lowering his voice with mock sympathy. "Next time, let the grown-ups make decisions." Then he pivoted sharply, stalking away in a storm of polished boots and bruised authority. Riley's face stayed neutral, but the sting lingered not from the insult but from the precision of his timing, too quick, too indignant, almost rehearsed. Her eyes slid back to the console. Two codes glowed faintly on the log, AR-530D, AR-531E, not routine, not standard. These weren't munitions that lingered on ordinary rosters. Their presence here whispered of something larger, something she wasn't supposed to see. Caught her pause. Their eyes met again, just long enough for her to feel the weight of his recognition. Without a word, he reached into his pocket, pressed a plain white card into her palm. Only a number printed on it. No name. "Call if you need." His voice was almost a whisper, as if meant only for her. By noon, the convoy was gone. 3 composite crates sealed, strapped down with precision, carried off as if each one could shift the balance of a war. The yard fell quiet again, save for cicadas humming beyond the fence line. Routine returned, but inside her silence was breaking. Hours later, in Colonel Rose's office, 2 strangers in dark suits waited across the desk. One introduced herself crisply, Agent Nora Pike, Defense Criminal Investigative Service. Beside her, Draper, FBI counterintelligence. Their faces gave little away. Their eyes, everything. They showed her satellite images. Utah, proving ground. Scorched barriers, blackened craters, sandbags caved under blast pressure. A drone attack that had nearly breached defenses just days earlier. The ordnance from Fort Stewart, Pike said. Without it would have fallen. But Draper's voice cut deeper. The attackers knew the exact transport window. They knew when that convoy would be vulnerable. His eyes narrowed. Inside leak. Colonel Rose folded her hands. Only 2 people at Fort Stewart had the timing, Major and you. The ceiling fan ticked above, loud against the silence. Riley stood at attention. Then she reached into her pocket, laid the plain white card on the desk. Its blankness filled the room. "My name isn't Riley," she said. Her voice was steady, almost too steady. "It's Captain, former 10th Mountain Division intelligence officer. Reduced, reassigned, given a false name after I against Colonel Mason Pride's reports." The words hit like a hammer. The agents shifted, verifying files locked beyond their usual clearance. And now, after months of silence, of carrying the weight of someone else's lies, she spoke again, voice unbroken. "I'm ready to go under again. If Black Crest Risk Solutions is buying classified intelligence, I'll bring back the network. Not just one man, the whole machine." The office stayed quiet. Then Colonel Rose leaned back, expression unreadable. "It seems the right person was guarding that gate after all." Slid the card back into her pocket. The decision was already made. The first move had been played. But she wondered, as she walked out into the dusk, how much of herself she would lose this time. Why would betrayal be priced like a grocery list? The hotel bar hummed with a low, velvety jazz, the kind of sound meant to soften conversations into shadows. Warm amber light spilled across polished tables, but in the corner booth, the shadows ran deeper. Riley sat there, though tonight she carried more than a borrowed name. Her glass of water caught the glow, her fingers steady against the condensation. Inside, her pulse ran a different rhythm. 2 figures slid into the booth. They moved with different textures. Victor Raines first, his suit dark, smile rehearsed, eyes too alive for the calm he tried to project. Sloane Kettering followed, measured, deliberate, her stillness a kind of power. Where Raines looked eager to sell, Sloane looked like she already owned the room. "15,000 per package," Raines said casually, as if discussing a menu item. "Routine reports, no questions asked." His tone was light, almost cheerful. The number lingered in the air. 15,000. The price of silence, betrayal, loyalty bent until it broke. Raised one eyebrow, feigning curiosity more than judgment. 15 buys silence, but you don't want silence. You want access, real access. That costs more. She let the pause drag, steadying her voice against the disgust simmering beneath her ribs. These men weren't just corrupt. They had turned betrayal into a business model, measured in neat increments, stripped of human cost. "You're talking about keys," she said, leaning forward slightly. "Keys that open doors while looking like ordinary office badges." Sloane studied her, one slow blink, then the faintest nod. "You understand more than most, show me." Slid a tablet across the table. On it, a diagram, 2 boxes, a line, a side channel hidden. "It's like a spare key hidden inside the lock," she explained, her voice steady. "You walk through the front room as usual. The copy slips into the side room unseen." Raines' grin widened, pleased. "Exactly. That's our method. Nothing noisy. Just a shadow moving alongside every real movement." His hands folded neatly, as if sealing a deal with himself. Then he leaned in closer. "We want that spare key installed on your depot's network. A patch, FDW Delta 72. Run it once. After that, we do the lifting." His smile held steady as he let the bait dangle. 200,000 on delivery. 50,000 monthly for your cooperation. The numbers clung to the air like smoke. Didn't flinch. Inside, her stomach turned. She thought of the burned sandbags, the scorched helmets, soldiers who had stood their ground not knowing betrayal was mapping them from behind, but her face gave nothing away. "And proof," she asked. "Proof you can cover me if something goes wrong, if the trail doesn't point back my way." Sloane's eyes sharpened, a flicker of approval. "That's why we test tonight. You'll push a maintenance window, 2340 to 2355, just a scheduling change, nothing serious. It tells us if you're for real." Lifted her glass, sipped slowly, and set it down without a sound. Her voice was cool, indifferent. "You'll have it." The conversation ended there. Sloane and Rains left as they had entered, Rains quick to rise, Sloane deliberate, as if time itself moved when she willed it. Sat a moment longer, her hands steady but her chest heavy. Then she returned to her room. Atlanta glittered outside her window, city lights sharp against the night. She pulled out her phone, dialed the secure line. "Test inbound," she told Agent Pike. "I need a honeypot." Within minutes, Draper patched through from the bureau. A decoy route, metadata traps. Every address that touched it would be logged, pinned. Black Crest thought they were testing her. Instead, they were about to paint their own fingerprints across federal screens. She closed the blinds, slipped her jacket on, and stepped into the night air. The hotel garage was quiet except for the echo of her footsteps. She knew she wasn't alone before she saw him. One of Black Crest's technicians kept a steady distance, phone angled like a mirror. The chase was deliberate, measured, a test inside a test. She walked, then slowed, then cut into a side exit, adjusted, shadowing. She felt the weight of old instincts returning, the kind she thought she had buried with her old name. She descended into the station, the escalator humming beneath her boots. The crowd swelled, blurred. Eyes scanned, searching. She moved with practiced ease. Into a shop jacket shed, a cap pulled low. She let the seconds stretch. When looked left, she was already gone. By the time she re-entered the hotel through a different door, her laptop glowed against the dark. The log scrolled fast, addresses spilling across the screen like spilled ink. V-Edge 03. A Black Crest node. Pike's voice crackled in her ear, low but triumphant. They bit hard. The next night, Rains returned. His smile sharper, his confidence heavier. He looked satisfied. "Clean," he said. "No alarms. You might be the kind we've been looking for." Sloane leaned forward. Her calm was different now, not testing but measuring. She swiped her tablet, showing photos, convoy fuel stops, reload times, rest points. Each detail harmless alone, together deadly. "Not everything requires classified files," she said. "We watch logistics, fuel, rations, flight hours. Stitch enough scraps together and you get the whole picture." His expression stayed flat, but inside her pulse kicked higher. Even without breaching a secure network, they had built a weapon out of patterns. Sloane's voice softened, almost intimate. "One of our prior contacts was Major Brent, 4 payments, $17,800 each, through Red Harbor Consulting." The name sliced through the air. Didn't react. She nodded once, letting the mask hold. But in her chest, anger flared, controlled, coiled, dangerous. Later, alone in her room, she stared at images on her own screen. Blackened sandbags, scorched dirt, a helmet half buried in soot. She closed her hand into a fist. The only words she let slip were quiet, barely more than a breath. "Not again." Why did the sound of footsteps behind her feel sharper than the hum of the city itself? The night was still but not silent. Atlanta streets carried the muffled thrum of neon signs, the restless buzz of late traffic, the occasional laugh spilling from a bar. Yet for Riley, as she wore the name in public, none of it mattered. What mattered was the shadow packing her rhythm, always 3 steps back, always in the glass reflections where he thought she wouldn't notice. Black Crest's technician, quiet, deliberate, his phone angled at his hip, capturing her every move. She let him think she was unaware. She moved like routine, like someone tired from a long shift, past the storefronts, down the escalator into the station. She blended with the crowd, their voices folding around her like camouflage. His gaze swept left, then right. He scanned the blur of passengers, the flicker of ads across tiled walls. She slipped into a kiosk, shed her jacket, pulled a cap low. Seconds stretched. When turned back, she was already gone, folded into the crowd like a ghost. By the time she returned to the hotel through a side door, her laptop was already alive. The log scrolled, fast and relentless. Pike's voice came through her earpiece, sharp but hushed. They've touched the trap. VA Core Hub, TX Relay, CA Mirror. They think they're invisible. We've got them. Leaned close to the screen. The honeypot was working. Every move they made mirrored. Every stolen key recorded. Black Crest believed they were whispering into silence, but each whisper was carried straight into federal hands. And yet, even as the data spilled, her chest tightened, because this wasn't over, not close. The next meeting came quick. Rain's smile was wider now, polished with arrogance. "You're clean," he said. "No alarms, that's rare, that's valuable." Sloane followed him, quiet as ever, but her eyes had sharpened. She wasn't testing anymore. She was measuring, calculating how far they could push this soldier in faded fatigues who seemed willing to trade honor for paychecks. She slid her tablet across the table. Images appeared. Convoy fuel stops, reload times, even rest points. "Not everything requires classified files," she said softly. "We stitch scraps together. Fuel, rations, shift rosters. Enough threads and you have the whole picture." His expression stayed neutral, but her pulse beat harder. She had walked battlefields where lives were lost because the enemy seemed to know more than they should. And here it was, a patchwork of logistics, sharpened into a weapon. Then Sloane dropped the knife she had been holding behind her back. "One of our prior contacts was Major Brent, 4 payments, 17,800 each, through Red Harbor Consulting." Yep. The name landed heavy but didn't blink, didn't breathe faster, didn't allow the betrayal to show. She nodded once, cool and unbothered, as if a major officer selling out his country was just another number on the list. But inside, her anger coiled tight, controlled, waiting. That night, alone in her room, she stared at her own tablet. Photos of the blackened dirt, the torn sandbags, a helmet half buried in soot. Soldiers had stood there, men and women who thought their defenses were enough, who never knew betrayal had been feeding the enemy their schedules. Her hand closed into a fist, and in the quiet, her voice broke the silence. "Not again." The next night, the stakes sharpened. Raines leaned back in the hotel booth, sliding a small drive across the table. "FTSW Delta 72, you know where it goes. Install it and you'll see the first transfer in 72 hours. 200,000 waiting." The drive was cold in her palm, light, almost weightless, and yet she felt the burden like steel. "Fine," she told them. "It gets installed. But when it runs, I'll need confirmation the trail points nowhere near me." Sloane gave the faintest smile. "That's our specialty. You worry about pressing execute. We worry about the noise." When walked back to her room, the city lights bled into her window. She sat at the desk, the drive resting there like a snake coiled on glass. Pike's voice cracked into her ear, steady but firm. "We're ready. The patch will look like it runs clean, but it'll mirror everything into our sinkhole server. They'll believe they slipped a key into your lock. In truth, every knock will echo straight to us." Pressed the drive into her pocket, rose and faced her reflection in the mirror. The uniform was simple, the hair tied back. To anyone outside, she was just a soldier on detail. But her eyes, the calm gray-blue, were something else. They carried years no one in that bar could imagine. The countdown had begun. At Fort Stewart, the depot lay quiet under the weight of midnight. The IT room hummed low, fans spinning against the silence. Riley again slid her badge, logged in, and seated herself at the console. Her fingers were steady, too steady. She inserted the drive. Delta 72 launched without hesitation. The monitor showed routine maintenance, harmless and dull. Beneath the surface, the honeypot stirred awake, waiting. Pike's voice came through, soft but electric. "They're in. VA hub TX relay, CA mirror, they believe they're ghosts. We see them clear." Noted the time, 2:07. And then boots in the hallway, heavy, precise, too precise. The handle turned. Her body stilled. Commander stepped in first, unreadable, followed, flanked by 2 MPs, his voice cut sharp. "Late night work, Sergeant, or something more interesting." The MPs spread wide, eyes sharp, waiting for orders. Wanted a show. Wanted to catch her dirty, expose her as the traitor he already painted her to be. Didn't flinch. She slid from the honeypot window into the warehouse inventory app. On screen, crates tallied, reports printed, numbers boring and harmless. Walked closer. His face gave nothing away. He leaned just enough, just low enough for his words to be hers alone. "Captain, it's 2:10. Don't lift your hands from that keyboard." The words cut like a lifeline. Relief washed through her chest, but she didn't let it show. His signal was clear. He knew. He was covering her. Circled like a hawk, eyes sharp for evidence. He found nothing. His jaw twitched, frustration leaking through. "Clean," he muttered. He waved the MPs away, rage masked as formality. Gave her one last look before leaving. Silent, steady. A signal she wasn't standing alone in this storm. The room fell quiet again, only the hum of the servers filling the air. Exhaled slow. The drive still glowed on the console. The game had moved to its next piece. And now, every move made, every order whispered by Black Crest, every step in the shadows, it was all converging. 72 hours, that was the window. And the next strike would not wait. What if the patch she installed wasn't what it seemed? The IT room at Fort Stewart was still thick with midnight air. The drive blinked faintly in the port, a small light against the hum of servers. On the monitor, routine windows scrolled by, maintenance tasks, inventory updates, dull lines of text meant to bore. But beneath the surface, something else had taken root, a shadow of their shadow. Delta 72 was running, and the honeypot was alive. His eyes traced the code as if following a trail in the dark. Each packet that slipped into the false lock echoed across a mirrored channel. Every address that touched it, every digital fingerprint, was caught in silence and carried to federal servers. In her earpiece, Pike's voice was clipped but electric. "We have them. VA Core Hub, TX Relay 2, CA Mirror 1, all active." On the other end, Draper's voice followed, low and tight. "They believe they're in. They're not. Every move they make, we own." His fingers stayed steady on the keys, but inside, her pulse tightened. Because while the trap was flawless, the danger wasn't digital. The danger had just walked into the room and left again, with rage twisting his jaw. Yep. He had wanted her dirty. He had wanted the satisfaction of catching Riley in the act, but he hadn't. Whispered warning, "Captain, don't lift your hands," still rang in her chest. Proof that he knew, proof that he was watching, yet had seen enough to know she was in motion. And men like him didn't let go. They circled. They hunted. By dawn, Draper had the evidence stacked like bricks on Colonel Rose's desk. Bank transfers glowed across the screen. 4 payments of $17,800 routed through Red Harbor Consulting, each one tied to accounts. His phone data pinged late nights in Savannah, meetings with known Black Crest contacts. The case was airtight. On paper, it was finished. Rose signed the arrest order with a firm stroke of her pen. Bring him in. But when the MPs reached his quarters, the room was bare. Drawers emptied, closets stripped, the trail already cold. Savannah airport footage showed him moving fast through the terminal, ticket in hand. At 4:05 he boarded west. Destination, Denver. Had slipped the net. Stood in Rose's office as the news broke. She said nothing. She didn't need to, because she knew men like him didn't run blindly. They ran toward something, toward allies who had promised them safe ground. And Black Crest had safe ground everywhere. That evening the phone buzzed. A voice she recognized now, Sloane Kettering's, calm and precise. "You'll see how the system really works. Corner 2 nights." The words carried no flourish, no threat, but felt the weight behind them. This wasn't another test. This was initiation. She set the phone down gently, almost reverently. 2 nights. The clock was ticking again. Corner was quiet that night, but the Black Crest Tower rose like a shadow of steel against the Virginia sky. Its glass walls glowed faint, the kind of corporate shine meant to reassure, but knew better. Beneath the polished exterior, the bones were iron. The silence was intentional. She entered under Riley's badge, steady in her step, neutral in her expression. Inside, the air shifted. The fourth-floor corridor buzzed with machines muffled behind walls. Security doors blinked red, then turned green as Sloane guided her through. The room they entered was sterile white. No decoration, no waste, bulletproof glass, signal-dampened walls. The hum of electronics was the only sound. Screens lined the walls, alive with maps, streams, patterns that seemed chaotic until they didn't. Sloane gestured broadly, her calm precise as always. "We don't steal files, we stitch scraps, fuel receipts, flight rosters, shift schedules, fragments from ordinary places. Alone, their noise, together, their clarity." Her hand swiped across her tablet. On the wall, timelines flared, convoys, flights, deployments. Threads that converged, forming pictures no soldier on the ground could see. Let her eyes narrow, feigning cold appraisal. Impressive, but inefficient, too many screens, too many hands. If you want speed, give me one dashboard, everything in one place. Raines chuckled, amused. She's bold. But Sloane didn't laugh. She hesitated just for a second, then tapped a code. The central screen blinked. A new interface opened, sleek and dark. Data poured across it like a river of stolen veins. "Black Crest Nexus," Sloane said quietly, "our crown jewel." The nodes lit up in succession. Virginia Hub, Texas Relay, California Mirror, 8 more scattered across the map, each pulsing with live feeds. Pulse held steady, but inside she knew. This was it. The evidence Pike and Draper needed. The confirmation had hinted was waiting. Her phone vibrated once in her pocket. The signal. Pike's clipped voice whispered through her earpiece, quiet enough to blend with the hum of the servers. "This is it, enough to prosecute, but we want everything, stand by." She stood still, calm on the outside, coiled on the inside. Sloane toggled to another tab. Client lists filled the screen. Company logos, shell entities, private military contractors hiding behind American names, and buried deeper 2 foreign buyers, allies in name only, traitors in practice. The weight of it pressed down. This wasn't fragments anymore. This was betrayal spelled out, alive on the glass. Her phone buzzed again. One message stark in white from 5:44, "No knock, hold position." The clock was already counting down. Stayed still in the sterile white room. Sloane watched her closely, searching for cracks, for tells, for anything that would reveal hesitation. Raines leaned forward, his pride glowing in the reflection of the Nexus dashboard. And Captain stood at the center of it all, calm, steady, but inside she was wound tight as wire. The trap was closing, the storm was minutes away. And when it broke, she would be standing exactly where she needed to be. What kind of betrayal could be stitched from scraps of ordinary life? The sterile white room glowed cold against skin. Monitors hummed softly, the air sharp with recycled chill. On the wall, streams of data converged into veins of light, forming a picture only traitors could admire. Sloane stood with her tablet in hand, face calm, voice even. "We don't need to break locks to know where people move," she said. "Fuel receipts, shift rosters, maintenance schedules, ordinary scraps. But together she swiped and the chaos stitched itself into order. Convoy paths, patrol rotations, flight departures, whole movements laid bare like arteries under glass. His gray-blue eyes narrowed just slightly. To anyone watching, she looked like a soldier evaluating a new tool, but inside, her chest burned, because she had stood in places where soldiers fought blind, never knowing the enemy had been handed their routes in advance. She had seen helmets lying in soot, sandbags blackened by fire, and now she was staring at the machine that made such betrayals possible. Sloane turned, her gaze sharp. Efficient, isn't it? War isn't about bullets anymore, it's about patterns. Whoever reads them first wins. Rains leaned back, smugness dripping from every line of his grin. And whoever sells those patterns profits. Let a pause hang in the air, her face still as stone. Then, flatly, too many screens, too many hands. If you want real speed, you need one dashboard. Rains chuckled, bold. But Sloane's lips pressed into a line. She tapped a code and the center screen blinked. The interface shifted, dark and sleek, precise. Black Crest Nexus, Sloane said. Her voice carried no boast, only certainty. Our crown jewel. The wall lit up. Virginia Hub, Texas Relay, California Mirror. More nodes pulsed across the map. Chicago, Dallas, San, Raleigh, Phoenix, Huntsville. 8 points of betrayal glowing alive. His pulse didn't change, but something in her chest tightened. This was it, not scraps, not fragments, the whole machine. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket, faint enough to be mistaken for nothing. She shifted slightly, eyes never leaving the screen. Pike's voice cracked into her earpiece, a whisper folded into the hum of the servers. Confirmation received, enough to prosecute, but we want everything, hold position. Her jaw stayed loose, her expression neutral, but inside the coil wound. Sloane's attention shifted again. Another swipe. The screen bloomed with logos, shell companies, contractors, some with names she recognized, some she didn't. Hidden buyers cloaked under American firms, and deeper still, 2 foreign clients, their symbols masked behind false fronts but their reach undeniable. The betrayal wasn't scattered anymore, it was whole, and it was suffocating. Her phone vibrated again, a single text from 544, no knock, hold position. The countdown had begun. His breath slowed. She shifted her weight just enough to keep the mask natural. Across from her, Sloane studied her face as if measuring bone by bone. Rains, leaning close to the glow of Nexus, looked like a man drunk on his own reflection. Outside, the city still slept. The glass walls of the tower shimmered faintly in the night. To anyone looking up from the street, it was just another office building. But inside, lives were being bought and sold in data streams. Soldiers' movements turned into contracts. Safety, auctioned to the highest bidder. And once buried under a false name, once stripped of her rank for daring to tell the truth, stood at the heart of it, silent, waiting. The minutes dragged, stretching like wire. Sloane moved from one console to another, checking nodes, making notes. Rains bragged about efficiency, about clients, about how no one notices the small things until they're already trapped. Let him talk. Let the room breathe arrogance, because arrogance was blind, and blindness would buy time. Her phone buzzed again. A final signal. Pike's voice whispered low, "Stand by, we're at the door." The second hand on the clock ticked louder than the servers. 5:43. Sloane looked at her. "You're quiet tonight." Met her gaze. "I watch more than I talk." Rain smirked. "That's why she'll last." 5:44. The building shook. A thunder that wasn't thunder. Glass rattled in the frame. Alarms shrieked, red lights flashing across sterile white walls. Boots stormed the corridor outside. Layered waves, disciplined, relentless. The hum of machines was drowned by the thud of doors collapsing. Sloane froze. Her calm cracked for the first time. Rain spun, eyes wide, hands half raised. "What the hell?" The door burst open. Agents flooded in. FBI marshals, layered black gear and rifles drawn, their voices cut sharp. Hands where we can see them now. Sloane's tablet clattered to the floor. Her arms were twisted behind her, cuffs locking cold. Victor Raines pressed himself back against the console, pale as the sterile walls, his arrogance shattered. And Captain stepped back from the dashboard half a pace, her hands raised in controlled calm. She didn't fight, didn't flinch, didn't need to. Because this was the moment she had been waiting for. The Nexus still pulsed, alive with stolen streams. Its glow washed her profile as agents swarmed the room. Logs downloaded, drives mirrored, evidence preserved, tagged, sealed. Every node, every client, every dollar funneled through Red Harbor Consulting. The betrayal was no longer whispers in dark corners. It was proof. But's eyes didn't stay on the screens. They shifted to Sloane, now pinned and cuffed, her stillness broken. They shifted to Raines, deflating into a man who suddenly understood that arrogance doesn't shield against justice. And through it all stood steady, not as Riley, not as the nameless guard no one noticed, but as Captain, the name they had tried to bury, alive again in silence. The alarm still screamed, the lights still flashed red, but beneath the chaos a truth settled like stone. This wasn't about money, or data, or even betrayal. It was about lives. And for the first time in years, she felt the weight in her chest shift, not vanish, but ease. Because the machine that had taken those lives was collapsing, right in front of her eyes. And she was standing at its center. What does betrayal look like when the walls finally come crashing down? The sterile white room still throbbed with the echoes of alarms. Red strobes bled across the walls, painting everyone inside in fractured light. Sloane Kettering was led out in cuffs, her shoulders square until the door closed and her frame slumped. Victor Raines sat pinned to the console, his face pale, his chest heaving as if the room had been drained of air. But the collapse wasn't staying within these walls, it was spreading. Across the country, at the exact same moment, doors burst open in Dallas, in San, in Tampa. Black SUVs rolled up to quiet warehouses that had pretended to be logistics hubs, to penthouse offices masquerading as investment firms, to suburban homes where data had been laundered in silence. In Dallas, agents cut power and stormed a warehouse filled with racks of servers. Lights flickered, then died, as men in undershirts were dragged into the night, shouting protests no one listened to. In San, a penthouse office stripped its shell company plaques from the walls, but too late. The glass shattered with the weight of the strike team, and the names they had hidden behind fell to the floor in fragments. Tampa's suburban safe house went down in minutes. Men who thought they had time to run opened their doors to rifles instead. They stepped out barefoot, wrists bound in front of neighbors who peered through blinds, confused by the dawn commotion. Raleigh, Huntsville, Columbus, Phoenix, 8 states, 41 arrests. The Black Crest web collapsed node by node, like a lung punctured and unable to breathe. And through it all, agents in corner mirrored every feed from Nexus, preserving every betrayal. The logs scrolled endlessly, contracts, client lists, payments. 4 deposits, each exactly $17,800, tagged to Major Brent. His name wasn't speculation anymore. It was written in digital ink. Yet himself was still a shadow. Stood half a pace back from the console, her hands still loose at her sides. The glow of Nexus washed her features, but her mind was far from the sterile room. It was following the man who had evaded arrest, the officer who had looked her in the eye days before and tried to humiliate her into silence. She could still hear his voice in the yard. Let the grown-ups make decisions. Now those words rotted in memory, because the man who had pretended to be the authority was running, stripped of everything except desperation. The reports came in fast. Savannah to Denver, a boarding scan at 4:05, a car rented under a false name. The black speck of a vehicle tracked along I-70, cutting through mountain passes with the kind of speed that only men on the edge carry. In Colorado, the road narrowed. Snow still clung to the edges of the highway, the mountains pressing in like silent witnesses. State patrol cruisers blocked the lanes ahead, lights flaring blue and red against the dawn gloom. FBI SUVs pinned the back. His car slowed, stopped. For a moment he didn't move. Inside he sat gripping the wheel, breath fogging the windshield, sweat beading down his neck. His hands shook, not with fight, not with anger, with the realization of what he had become. The door opened. Cold alpine air cut across his face. He stepped out slowly, hands raised, shoulders sagging under the weight of choices that could not be unmade. No speeches, no final outburst, just a man undone by his own betrayal. The cuffs clicked around his wrists, steel and final. And that was it. No firefight, no defiance, only the hollow silence of a man who had believed he was untouchable, now reduced to a file number and a trail of payments. Back in Virginia, the sterile room smelled of dust and ozone from shattered doors. Agents packed evidence into sealed containers, drives into bags, logs into servers. The machine of betrayal was being carried out piece by piece, its power dismantled by its own arrogance. Stood still through it all. She wasn't triumphant, she wasn't proud, she was steady. Because she knew the truth, victories like this didn't carry glory, they carried weight. She thought of the blackened dirt, of helmets lying half-buried in soot. Men and women who had stood their posts, unaware that their positions had been sold in conference rooms like this one. The silence of those fields haunted her more than the alarms screaming here. His message still lingered in her pocket. 5:44. No knock, hold position. He had known where she would be when the walls fell. He had trusted her to stand steady. And she had. As the agents moved around her, one of them brushed past, whispering, "You did good," but didn't respond, because in her chest she wasn't sure if good existed in this work anymore. All she knew was necessary. Hours later, the news would hit wires in fragments. Major defense contractor investigated for irregularities. Several business leaders in custody. Federal raid in Virginia linked to ongoing probe. But no headline would capture the truth. No reporter would know how close the blade had come to cutting deeper. And maybe that was how it had to be. Because victories like this lived in silence. They lived in the spaces between alarms, in the pauses after cuffs clicked, in the quiet hum of servers that would never betray again. And Captain stood in that silence, knowing the world would never see the whole board she had just played. But that was enough. How does a soldier carry the weight of a name buried by lies? The morning after the raids, Fort Stewart was unnaturally calm. The cicadas hummed, the grass shimmered with dew, and the Georgia sun pushed up over the horizon as if nothing had changed. But inside Colonel Rose's office, everything had shifted. On her desk lay a folder, not thick, just a handful of papers, a pen, and a signature line waiting. Rose's hand moved slow, deliberate. The scratch of the pen was sharp in the silence. When she finished, she closed the folder and pushed it across the desk toward the woman standing at attention before her. "Captain," she said, the name landed steady without ceremony but with certainty. "Your service is intact. Your record is clean. Welcome back." Didn't move at first. The words filled the air, heavy and unreal. Her eyes dropped to the folder. Inside, the false records were dissolved, the stain of Mason Pride's retaliation erased. The burden she had carried under the name Riley had been lifted with a single signature. For a long moment she only breathed, in, out, quiet. Then she nodded once. "Thank you, ma'am." Rose's face didn't soften. She wasn't the type for warmth, but her eyes carried a weight understood, respect, and beneath it an acknowledgement of the years stolen by silence. The meeting ended quickly, as military meetings do. No applause, no ceremony, just an order returned to balance. But as stepped out into the morning, the air felt different, lighter, sharper. She walked across the depot yard, past the wire fences, past the bunkers lined in concrete. Soldiers moved as they always had, logging crates, checking rosters, securing gates. None of them knew the storm that had passed. None of them knew the cost of what had been dismantled. And that, she thought, was exactly how it should be. Later that afternoon, another figure walked into the yard. His steps were unhurried, his presence calm but undeniable. Commander Grant. There was no convoy this time, no black SUVs, just him. The smell of steel and oil hung in the air. Stood near the checkpoint, her uniform bearing her true name again, stitched clear across the chest. The alias of Riley had been retired. Extended his hand. "If you ever want to work with people who measure by results," he said, his voice steady, "my door is open." His tone wasn't persuasive. It wasn't recruitment. It was something else. An offer made once with no pressure, no strings. Shook his hand, firm but brief. "I still have work here," she answered. Nodded, satisfied. He didn't argue, didn't repeat himself. He simply released her hand and stepped back as if the exchange was enough. And it was. Because the offer itself was more than an invitation. It was recognition. A SEAL commander had looked at her, not at Riley, not at a cover name, not at a scapegoat stripped of rank, and seen her worth. When he left, the yard settled into silence again. But his words stayed. That night, alone in her quarters, sat with the uniform folded on her lap. Her fingers traced the name stitched across it, letter by letter. For years, she had worn another's name. She had taken insults meant for ghosts, played the role of invisible soldier, endured the sting of being dismissed because her record had been by lies. Now the lies were gone, her name restored, her place returned. And yet the weight in her chest hadn't disappeared, because clearing a record doesn't erase memory. It doesn't restore time. It doesn't give back the soldiers lost at, or the silence of helmets lying in soot. She closed her eyes and let herself feel it. The pride of survival, the ache of loss, the sharp edge of anger dulled into something heavier, something like acceptance. For the first time in years, she allowed herself a thought she had buried deep. Maybe she wasn't broken, maybe she was simply, and scars, after all, are not weakness. They are proof of healing. The next day she walked the yard again, the same guard post, the same logbook. To others it was routine, to her it was something more. Every fence she checked, every code she logged, carried a weight now, because she knew what had been waiting just beyond the gates. She knew how close the country had come to bleeding in silence. And still the soldiers around her laughed, traded jokes, carried on. They had no idea. They didn't need to. That, she realized, was the point. Her service wasn't meant to be known. It wasn't meant for parades or headlines. It was meant for the quiet, for the work that kept others safe without ever letting them feel the danger. And in that realization, something inside her settled. Her name was back, her record was clean, but her purpose had never changed. She was still the one at the gate. When the sun set that evening, this offer echoed again in her mind. "If you ever want to work with people who measure by results, my door is open." She could have left. She could have stepped into the sharp edge of the world he offered, chasing operations across oceans, measuring worth in raids and recoveries. But for now she stayed. Because sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought abroad. They're fought in silence, in the shadows, in the ordinary places no one looks twice at. And she knew herself enough to know she was exactly where she needed to be. Why did it feel different to sit at the same gate, in the same chair, with the same logbook? The morning broke the way it always had at Fort Stewart. The grass bent with dew. The chain-link fence glistened with the pale light of dawn. The air carried the metallic chill of early Georgia hours, sharp and grounding. Inside the guard shack, Captain sat alone. Her uniform bore her true name again, stitched in clear black letters over her. Not Riley, not an alias borrowed to bury someone else's lies. Her name, restored. The logbook lay open before her. She uncapped the pen, its weight familiar. The pages smelled faintly of ink and dust, filled with neat handwriting from countless quiet mornings. She wrote carefully, each letter deliberate. Ammunition yard all secure, 612. The words were simple, routine, but as the ink dried, they carried the weight of months, of years, of silence endured and storms weathered. She leaned back in the chair and let the hum of morning surround her. The cicadas outside, the faint buzz of fluorescent light above, the stillness of bunkers standing unchanged, concrete and warning signs steady against the fence line. On the surface, nothing was different. The world hadn't shifted. Soldiers moved as they always did, trucks rolled where they always had, and the base woke with its ordinary rhythm. But for her, everything had changed. She had stood at this same gate when black SUVs rolled in, and the words of a SEAL commander shattered her routine. She had stood here when sneered, when authority mocked her into silence. She had stood here when suspicion was thrown like a stone, when the ceiling fan ticked above Colonel Rose's office, and her true name spilled out again after years of being buried. And she was standing here still, after Black Crest collapsed, after Nexus flickered with stolen lives, after cuffs clicked on wrists that had thought themselves untouchable. No one else on base knew the depth of it. They wouldn't, they shouldn't. The depot was secure, the country slept, and that was enough. Later that afternoon, she walked the yard alone. Her boots pressed gravel into the earth, each step measured, steady. She passed the bunkers, their steel doors locked with routine precision. She touched one briefly, her palm flat against the cool concrete. The surface gave nothing back, just silence, just strength. Her eyes lifted toward the horizon. The Georgia sun climbed higher, burning the mist into clear light. The wire fences gleamed. Beyond them, the world stretched, wide and unaware. She thought of again, the burned sandbags, the helmet lying in soot, the blackened dirt where silence had almost given way to collapse. And she thought of the faces in corner, the calm shattering in Sloane's eyes, the arrogance draining from Raines, the fury masked as authority in before it finally broke into surrender on a cold Colorado road. She thought of his offer, "My door is open." And she thought of her own answer, "I still have work here." Because she did. Not glamorous work, not celebrated work, but necessary. The kind of work that never makes headlines. The kind of work that carries dignity in silence. She drew a breath deep and steady, let it fill her chest, let it settle into her bones. Then she turned back toward the guard shack. Inside, the chair creaked as she sat again. The logbook waited, its pages ready for another line. She uncapped the pen, paused, then set it to paper. All secure. 2 words, nothing more. Yet in them lived everything. The betrayals uncovered, the networks dismantled, the traitor caught, the name restored. The world would never know, the base would never see, the morning would pass as every morning had before. But she would know. She closed the book and leaned back, letting her eyes fall shut for a moment. The hum of morning filled the space again, unbroken, unremarkable, perfectly ordinary. And in that ordinariness there was peace. Because some victories don't shout, some names aren't restored.